little bit about social media. Vicky and others who organize this conference say that that's the sort of ongoing, recurring request from people at analytics conferences, but not that many people want to stand up and talk about it. So I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about social media today, what it means to consumers, what we're doing at iHeartMedia, and I will take that path and then ground it back to insights, analytics, and what we can do with the data. So let me start with the story of social media. I don't need to tell you how incredibly important social media is. Most of you are updating your Twitter, your Facebook, your Instagram, or your Snapchat or something, especially him over there, as we are sitting here and working, right? And that's fine. It's woven into everyone's lives. I have some data points I'm sharing from Millennials here, but look at anyone under the age of 18, and there is no life without social media and so on. There's new emerging technology or platform every single day. So whether you are 6 or 65, chances are 1 or 2 or 3 or more forms of social media are completely woven into the fabric of your lives. And what's also important for many of us to know is that it's important socially, for lack of a better term, but it's also very much now about products, services, recommendations, and other things we do, because the purchase funnel is very much not a funnel anymore. We all talk about the circle and so on, and about how, after purchase, the recommendation cycle is very critical to the life of a product. And as you focus more on younger generations, and I find millennials very interesting, though I have to say I find Gen Z, the generation after them, even more interesting. If you think about millennials, one surprising fact about them is that they're the most educated generation in American history, right? By far, children of boomers, more college degrees, more years of education, more reading. In our world, they will listen to hour or 2 hour or 6 hour long podcasts when everyone else can barely handle a soundbite, right? So highly educated, and an expectation of intelligence, of content that teaches them something is also baked a little bit to how brands communicate about social media. It can't just be shilling, as we say, right? It's got to be something provocative and certainly educational. And social media very much, as we can all see, is a complementary medium. It's complementary to radio, complementary to television, complementary to conference attendance, and even work. So, we just have to think about social in the context of everything else that people are doing. But it's not just about hashtags, right? I spent the first decade or more of my career in television. At that point, it was literally, put a hashtag at the bottom of a screen and people will. That's your social strategy. And of course, that's completely nonsensical if you think about it. But based on your brand, based on your category, based on your product, you need very specific, authentic, thoughtful, targeted execution against social. So I will talk a little bit about how we activate social at iHeartMedia. I will talk a little bit about the data coming out as well and what we do about it. But my larger point here is that there is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to social. You have to know your audience. You have to know your product. You have to be very, very thoughtful in what you are doing. And you have to leverage what you have at service to you. So something that we're very privileged to have in our arsenal are artists themselves, right? So you can't break a record, honestly, in this country without iHeartMedia, because every big song that breaks on the radio, and then it's picked up in, in social and picked up in Spotify and everywhere else. But we are the ones who break new music in this country. And so we have a wonderful relationship with various artists. We get to hear their music early, whether they're emerging artists or whether they're established artists. And we have entire programs around them. And so we very much bake this relationship into artists, into our connections with our fans and our consumers, and create multi-platform experiences around that. And I'll come back and talk about that in a moment. The artist is important, but culture has become fundamentally democratized today. There used to be a hierarchy between talent and consumer, and that has very much broken down millennials and post-millennials. There's an expectation that the artist, the talent is accessible to them. You talk to them on Twitter, you talk to them on Facebook, you talk to them on Snapchat, you talk to them on Instagram, and you expect them to talk back at you. So there's a fundamentally different expectation of what a relationship looks like. So what do? Knowing this insight about our consumer. We used to have announcements. We used to have press releases. We used to have things like, here are the artists who will be playing at the 2017 iHeartRadio Music Festival. Here are the artists who will be playing at the iHeartRadio Awards show. But we're taking a different approach now, and we're allowing fans themselves to be the voice of the brand, and I'll show you how we have important corporate announcements come from the voice of consumers themselves. Couple other points I make. There is not a day that goes by without a new form of social media, a new platform, a new app, and so on. So you really have to be flexible and nimble, and content that works for one does not work for the other. Some are vertical, some are horizontal, some are audio, some are video, some are something else that I haven't even thought of yet, right? So your teams have to be agile and nimble and constantly adapt to emerging social media platforms. And strategies can't be one size fits all. There's this ongoing joke, right, that people often make a 30-second video ad, and then they use the same audio on radio, and then they put the same thing on a mobile phone. Well, it doesn't work like that anymore. You have to be very specific. Something that works on Snapchat is not going to work on Facebook, and certainly is not going to work on Twitter, and is not going to work on TV or on radio, so you have to think about format itself, or as we like to say in tech speak, form function, and really adapt your advertising and your messaging. And ultimately, it's the age of democratization. It's the age of human connection. It's the age of authenticity. So you have to humanize these relationships and have genuine two-way communication. So let me give you some examples of how we do that. So I talked about relationships with artists, right? What does this actually look like when you're breaking a song or breaking a record or doing something on air? This is just an example. Shawn Mendes had a single last year, Treat You Better, but we want to connect fans directly with artists. So what did we do? We had him on the Elvis Duran show in the morning. We then had exclusive access to him online. We had a full-day takeover of our Snapchat account by Shawn, chronicling Shawn's day, essentially. We had a Facebook Live broadcast. We had a Twitter Q&A with him. And then we had a concert that day in our theater, so live, experiential. Many of us were present there. But then we live streamed the whole thing online. So you can see every possible way we could allow a fan to connect with the talent. We did. And some of them were social, some of them were digital, some of them were linear, but everything was in service of that big day that was all about Shawn. And these are just some examples, some visuals from Snapchat, from Twitter, from Facebook Live, about the various strategies. As you can see, started very, very early in the morning and went on all day into the night. But just as important as the artist are the fans themselves, the humans that make this world go around. So, a lot of you watch award shows, I'm sure, Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. It's usually fun when someone does something they're not supposed to do, and that makes it better for all of us. But what we realized is that a lot of the award shows were getting a bit dated, right? They weren't quite right for the age of social media. So what did we do? We actually had a socially generated or socially awarded award, which is called Best Fan Army. This is not an award for an artist. This is not saying, Katy Perry Song of the Year or Taylor Swift Album of the Year. We're saying who has the best fans in America today, right? So we're awarding the fans for being awesome fans, and we allowed fans themselves, or fan ambassadors, leading influencers in social, to announce these nominations in social media. You have this girl announcing that the Beliebers, Justin Bieber's followers, are nominated for the Best Fan Army. And look, we have Taco Bell in there as a sponsor, so we got that out as well. The Directioners with One Direction, when there was still a One Direction, right? They get to award it, they get to announce that they have been nominated. And the Harmonizers with Fifth Harmony, they get to talk about themselves. So you can think about the kind of chatter and the kind of excitement you generate in social when you allow people to become the stars themselves. And I'll come back and show you some of the metrics we got against this in a bit. We talked a lot about different social platforms and how you have to be, really snappy and nimble. And so, YouNow was quite hot for a while, now mainly among younger people, but just, we had people perform covers with Hailee Steinfeld of her song on YouNow, and she got to react to people performing covers of her songs, and she also was on Facebook, also was on Twitter, and so on. But again, we had to come up with a very sort of YouNow-specific strategy for Hailee to engage with fans in that youth-oriented platform. Along the same lines, each form of social media has its own strengths, its own weaknesses, its own unique idiosyncrasies. And so, double tap. Big deal on Instagram, so make that part of your content and have people fill in. Double taps on Taylor Swift, and so on, and really sort of make your experience in social media authentic, yes, to your brand, but also authentic to the medium itself. This if anything, is the most important fact, right? It's about humanizing the relationship, changing the dynamic, understanding we're not in a hierarchical world anymore, and allowing access. And I talk a lot about artists here, but I don't think this is unapplicable to those of you who work on other brands, whether it's financial services, healthcare, or something else, because you too have to become human. You too have to become accessible, because that is the expectation of a consumer today. So this is Twitter Tuesday. We have different artists take over our Twitter handle, right? It's the iHeartRadio Twitter handle, but they answer questions with the hashtag Twitter Tuesday or iHeart Shawn Mendes, iHeart Taylor Swift, iHeart whoever. So we're humanizing iHeart the brand as well as the artist by allowing fans to be part of a direct conversation with them. And I will end this part on a very direct story. Right? This happened a week ago. This tragically was exactly the same venue as Las Vegas, where we had this awful massacre just a few days ago. And I was there a week ago. And because we had a 2-day festival called the iHeartRadio Music Festival. And this was our daytime village where we have artists perform all day long. And this was Baby Rexha, whom some of you may know, but your chances are you know her better if you're under the age of 14. But totally awesome, amazing artist, great singer-songwriter, and so on. And we were hanging out there, and I had a meet and greet with Baby Rexha, and that's my little daughter there. And we were just, the way these meet and greets work is, there's an artist out there, and you get there, and you get your picture taken, and you kind of walk off stage, and that's kind of the protocol of a meet and greet. But my family and I walked up there, and my daughter just started quite authentically telling Baby Rexha what a great fan she is and how deeply she loves her. And Baby Rexha, being a modern artist, understanding the need for humanity, the need for being accessible, tells us to hang back, right? So Baby Rexha tells us to hang back, and we're like, sure, why wouldn't we hang for Baby Rexha? So we hang over there, and then Baby Rexha gets my daughter back again, and this is actually a video, you can't see the whole thing here because we couldn't figure out how to load it, has this moment where she instantly snaps and puts on Instagram this interaction with an 11-year-old girl, right? The sweetest girl ever. Moments like this keep me grounded and remind me why I do what I do. I love you guys. You would not have, I kind of can't imagine an artist from the 70s or 80s doing the same thing, pulling random people out, talking about them. But artists today have recognized the need to be human, the need to put themselves out there, the need to be vulnerable, to have these authentic moments. And I would encourage all brands to put a little bit more of themselves out there, because as you can see, this within a couple minutes had 500,000 views. So not bad for a Saturday afternoon. I talked a lot about our strategies around social media. But how did we get here, right? We didn't just wake up one day becoming awesome at social media. I wish it were that story. I wish it were that easy. We spend a lot of time studying consumers through both big data analytics and traditional consumer insights, and we learn a lot about them that we can then translate back into brands. So I talked about artist relationships, I talked about fan ambassadors, I talked about emerging content, etc. But all of this was grounded in tons of work, ranging from social media mining to big data analytics, to focus groups, to surveys, to all kinds of person on the street interviews that taught us about the reverence and love for artists, the need for democratization, the expectation for the rapidly changing liquid and live nature of content, the increased relevance of content, the expectation that content be relevant, and finally, the need for interaction and true human connection. So we've done a ton of work, and then we were able to translate many of these back into strategies, but they are based in ground truths, baked in data and insights. So let's share some results, and then let's share some other fun stuff we do with social media data. I don't know what to say. This was the iHeartRadio Music Festival, Music Award Show, the one where people got to nominate themselves and be fan ambassadors. More impressions than the Super Bowl, the Grammys, the Oscars, or anything other. I mean, there are lots of other social metrics as well. We were just trying to simplify it for the presence of this room and this audience. But when you really put yourself at the center of stories and are human and authentic and even vulnerable, you can crush it. You can crush the competition, you can crush established brands, and you can win in ways you never thought was possible. And this is true across our events, whether it's the pool party, the jingle ball, the country music show, or something else. What do we do as an insights and analytics functions in terms of social media analytics, because it's constantly changing. It's incredibly hard. There aren't ideal partners out there because, you know, someone doesn't have Instagram, someone doesn't have Snapchat, someone doesn't have something else. Right? There's always something, right? So don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. Just do the best you can. So what we do as an analytics function is identify partners with the broadest possible social footprint. Like, I want more. I can't have people who are like, I have everything except Facebook, or I have everything, but I have nothing visual. It doesn't work, right? I need partners who can think broad and who can use AI and NLP and everything else to get me as much data as possible. And then I have to find passionate owners within my team, right? There are people I have who kind of like never want to be on Snapchat. So I can't put them in charge of my social media analytics or my social media strategy. I put people like Hital in charge because they are literally on every social media out there. And she's following every account out there. And I don't have to go tell her who Baby Rexa is because she already knows, because she's already, you know, was referenced by the Kardashians doing something. So I need people like her who are really into my world and into social media and into pop culture. And of course, you have to know your product and your experiences and be really immersed there. You have to be willing to change in real time. A lot of this number crunching sounds simple, but what this number crunching looks like practically is we have a war room set up at every event. We have teams literally working 24/7, and I am personally publishing analytics at 3 a.m. Las Vegas time, which is 6 a.m. New York time, so I don't even know what time zone I'm in, but that's the kind of commitment, dedication, work it requires. It's literally 24/7, and we're all in the war room, and we're in the concert, and we're running back and forth, and we're changing hashtags in real time, and publishing in real time. And ultimately, you have to know what your, there's certain metrics that my internal teams care about. There are others my advertising partners care about. So you have to be nimble and flexible with all of that. So I talked a little bit about our social media strategies, how they're grounded in insights, and how we're actually kind of doing them in real time. And it's a lot of work, but really is a lot of fun. So I encourage everyone to get in there. But I also want to talk about social media data, not as an end in itself, but as something that can enable and even turbocharge your other analytics. So we have the iHeartRadio app. It has about 100 million registered users, 107, I think, by last count. What we do, so you have digital, right? And you have digital, which has like a bazillion audience segments and a bazillion ways to target people, and data that honestly is not always the greatest, because as we've seen through Facebook and other restatements, can't always count on it to be right, but there's a ton of data that's being thrown out, right? On the other hand, you have TV and radio, where there's high quality in the data, but not as granular, right? You can't, I can get 50 segments maybe, but I can't get 700 segments, right? So we use social and other data to connect the two to make for a richer experience for ourselves and for our partners. So this is just one example, and we should probably update that 85 to 107, because we keep getting more people every day. But we take a lot of list of the email IDs and other data that we get from our registered users. We match their social accounts. We then, through machine learning, project it and normalize it and match it to broadcast, and what we spit out on the other end are 700 audience segments for broadcast. So there's a lot I said in that, right? But essentially you're taking something that has a high degree of granularity, there's something else there with a high degree of fidelity, and you're using social media and other connections as well as machine learning to take this and spit it out onto that. Think of it as lookalike modeling, but on a much bigger, fancier scale, right? Because everybody lookalike models. Like, let's be honest, Facebook lookalike models, everyone lookalike models. The innovation here is lookalike modeling from one medium onto another medium using the same strategies that you use within digital media, because why not? It's the same science, it's the same math, right? And the results are just as good. No better, no worse. And then you can talk about a whole other experience with a high degree of granularity. So what that means is we can, in addition to selling men, women, millennials, and so on for broadcast media, have 700 audience segments we can sell against, including, quite specifically, I just use some examples of people who love action movies, people who love drama, people who love video games, and so on. Or you can have creative that's optimized for weather, for changes in finance, for gas prices, for employment, for mortgage rates, or anything else. And you can do this activation with the scale of broadcast media. So I realized at this point that I was entertaining you a lot with a lot of my social media stories, and then we got into heavy-duty analytics. But I think the larger point that we're trying to make is you have to be in there, right? You have to be in every form of new data and new medium and new forms of social media data. But don't let the things you can do with it be limited to measuring or analyzing that medium alone. Start to have big ideas, big bursts of creativity, fearless, leaps of faith, and then you can do much more than what you set out to do when you started on the journey. Thank you.